Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by John Paul Mason and Stevie Mullen. Welcome back to the show, guys.
Welcome, Paul. Thanks for having us.
Well, it's always a pleasure to see you. I mean, this time last week we were in the midst of that bad run, and we were looking ahead to the European game. And I think the mood's changed a wee bit. What a difference a week makes in the life of a Celtic fan. We'll be talking all about that, obviously, in the lead up to the Scottish Cup final. And I will be interested to hear your thoughts on how Celtic are going to line up, because that seems to be the biggest concern, actually, in relation to Lenny giving players a start through loyalty and sentimentality. I'll start with yourself, JP. What's your thoughts on the comments by Neil Lennon, particularly after the last couple of games that we've enjoyed?
Well, I think there's been a lot made of this. There's been a lot of sort of excitement about the last couple of games, and obviously relief that we've found our way back to winning ways. And I think, everyone's just like, oh, but I can't believe he said that at the end. And, it's almost put a dampener on things. And it's just like, well, I don't really see why it has. One, it could be mind games. And, I don't doubt it for it. Because Neil Lennon's always sort of been saying in the past in his press conferences, when asked about team selections, he's like, well, I'm not going to tell you, Charles. I'm not going to say this or that. I'm not going to reveal things. So if he has revealed something in that interview, how do we know that it is actually going to come to pass? And even if he did bring back Scott Brown, I don't have any fears about Scott Brown playing in the Scottish Cup final against Heart and Midlothian. I think Scott Brown's been through the course of events in the last 9 years or more, and I don't think it would be a kick in the face to Sorrow if he did bring back Scott Brown. Turnbull's a different story. Turnbull has to start on Sunday. There's no question for me that Turnbull's a starter on Sunday. He's played his way into that team, and Hazard as well. I can't see any sense in dropping him. It looks like he's going to keep Hazard now, possibly until Ibrox. Because why change it again? That would be weird.
No, you're right. I mean, Stevie, JP's of the view that Turnbull must start and Hazard should keep the jersey as well. However, if Brown was to come into the team, then he wouldn't really be all that concerned, particularly with the opposition that we're playing. What's your view on that in terms of the sentimentality, talking about the loyalty of the players that got us there? How would you approach the lineup on Sunday?
I would make two changes from the team. I would have Christie in for Frimpong, I'd have Laxalt in for Taylor. No room for sentiment for this game for last year or guys' previous great performances for the club getting us to this stage. We play the best team. We came upon this team last week through good luck, good fortune, and I don't think they've done anything to be dropped. Hearts are totally paceless, and I don't think Scott Brown would enhance our performance against them when we're playing against a paceless team. Mm-hmm. Absolutely no problem with him coming on for a cameo at the end of the game. If you're winning and to lift the cup, I think he deserves that, but I wouldn't have him in the starting 11.
See, when you're looking at the forward positions, and we've spoken to all the contributors this week about their predicted lineup, Stevie, and Edouard's off form. So on the one hand, I'm going on about playing the form players and ensuring that Sorrow and Turnbull and Hazard start, playing Ayer at right back, playing Duffy at centre half. When it comes to Edouard, he's off form, so I'm probably contradicting myself by saying I would still start with Edouard. What's your thoughts on that one, Stevie?
I would start with Edward. I don't see any of the other guys putting about the team because I don't think any Raymond blinding for him either. But we know we've got a player that's capable on a big stage, which he's done even this season when he's not really been at it, and perform admirably in the big games.
And again, he's one of the guys, even though he's not playing all so well, you get a chance like he did against AC Milan, and he still has that nonchalance to dink it over the goalie. And you look around and you think to yourself, well, you know, I'm a big fan of Lee Griffiths, but he's no fit. Ajeti is off form. Klamala, he's a trier, but, you know, beyond that, I'm not quite sure what he brings to the equation. JP, what's your thoughts in relation to the one up top? Because I'm guessing he will still play with one up top.
Yeah, I think Edward is surely got to start on Sunday. I mean, I've been as frustrated as anybody watching him play, because you start to think, is his heart not in it and things like that. But there was one still image that I saw from the game on Sunday when they were all the players were celebrating Duffy's goal, and right centre of the picture was Edward with a big beaming smile, and I just thought, nah, this guy's there's still a good amount of him there with Celtic, and you know, I just think things haven't been coming off for him. You know, that volley against was it against Kilmarnock where he hit the volley from Turnbull's pass? You know, where another game that goes in off the post or something like that. And you know, there's other wee things that he's tried that just haven't come off. And I wouldn't be surprised if something came off on Sunday for him. Put it that way.
JP, have you any concerns about Sunday? I mean, I would never be lax about any cup final or playing Hearts just because they're in the Championship. How do you see the game going? Do you think we can continue this run? I'm calling it a run. It's 2 games, building momentum. Do you think that there has been a turning point in Celtic's season? I know that after the Lille game, we were all trying to temper our enthusiasm and our reaction. But if you start to, you know, string 2-3 games together, then you're looking towards Ibrox and you're trying to then win your league games in between then. Do you think, you know, the signs are there that we can turn this season around?
I do. I would never be as bullshit as to say, oh, well, we're just going to go and we're going to batter Hearts and they're a Championship team and they're this and they're that, because it's a cup final. And as we saw last night, anything can happen in a cup game. You know, it's one of those. But at the same time, I did make a point when I was on last week, which was pre the Lille game, and I made the point that a lot of the players I thought were maybe a bit lethargic, maybe a bit kind of, you know, we've been through this before, and you know, do we really want to do it again? And I think the new players, as I said, would encourage a bit of hunger and have injected a bit of hunger, which can rub off on other people. It's like when I started going on tour with a band, with the Twilight Sad, I would be all excited about all the new things we'd be doing on tour, and they're like, oh, you know, we've done this before. We've ran up the rocky steps. Do you know what I mean? We've been to, you know, this place or that place. But then they've said to me after the affair, they've been like, you know, you coming on tour gave us a bit more enthusiasm because we were like, you know, getting excited again about doing things. And I think that's maybe what's happening here with, you know, these wee guys coming in who've not won anything, and then they're contributing to a winning team. And then all of a sudden the other players are going, oh, this is actually, you know, this is what it's all about, you know? And I really think there's a lot to be said for that.
You know, when you're looking at it, Stevie, you're looking at the enthusiasm and the added energy that the newbies bring to the table, particularly Sorrow. I mean, people were mentioning Sorrow in the same breath as Luke O'Connell. Give Luke O'Connell a game, give Sorrow a game. And for me, they were kind of on the same level in terms of where they were in the pecking order. I hadn't seen enough of Sorrow, but and on one hand, I'm thinking, brilliant, it's worked out as something of a masterstroke. But then I'm asking, why wasn't he introduced to the side before now? Because the team were looking a bit stale. How important for you do you think this added energy brings to the Celtic side? And would you encourage, you know, the likes of Sorrow and Turnbull and Hazard, if you were a football manager or involved in a football team, would you be encouraged if you were another young guy coming through, such as the likes of, let's say, Henderson, who we've seen this season, Johnston coming back into the side? How good does that feel for these other guys, thinking, you know, we might be part of that?
I don't think we should dismiss the part Ewan Henderson played last week either when he came on. I thought he was very, very good. The young guys in the middle of the park, and we all have to be aware, they'll have a dip in form, you know, if they continue to play. They will not play to that level every week, but they've gave you a vibrancy about the team. I love David Turnbull's attitude. He usually takes the ball in a half turn to drive forward, where the other guys take a first touch to go back and keep possession. If he does that, then he's getting right onto the opposition's back four. Sorrow's covering every blade of grass. I think he made, was it something like 9 tackles in the first half last week against Leo, which again is fantastic because Scott and Callum McGregor haven't been making the tackles. So all of a sudden they're good players going, where's this guy coming from? I thought it was a real show of character to come back after losing a goal, twice to get back with a winner. Previously we'd ended up losing that game 4-2. I thought it was brilliant. Great to see the young goalie as well.
Well, we've spoken about goalkeepers quite a bit this season, Stevie. We've also spoken about the lack of youth coming through. People then start giving us all the names of those who have established themselves. But for a club the size of Celtic, I don't think that enough youth players have come through. When was the last goalkeeper? Was it David Marshall? And of course, he lasted a few seasons before moving on. Striker, when was the last prolific goal scorer that we brought through the ranks? We used to be famed for bringing through goal-scoring strikers. So when I'm looking at Hazard, I've seen a lot of people saying, well, it's a cup final and we should maybe go with someone who is more experienced than, the likes of Bain or Barkas. But for me, you can't on one hand want youth to develop, but then when you get a sight of someone who can make a difference, then drop them for a big game like that. I believe that Hazard will start against Hearts. I mean, if he doesn't, Stevie, what would that do to the lad's confidence?
I think he's just got to start because he's been playing better. The other 2 guys aren't out because they've been injured or they've been suspended. Both of them were dropped because they weren't performing well enough. So I don't see what you do. I don't think that young guy's done anything wrong. And to get your development, here's another question. When was the last time we developed a Scottish goalie? It's got to be David Marshall.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right.
I think he started. I think the communication's better because I don't think Barkas has got much English. So even try to organise yourself with defence if you can't speak the language, I think would be a big, big problem. I think him coming in, Duffy coming back into the left side of the defence has been quite a shocking thing, but he's done very well. And I've never been a great Christopher Ayer supporter as a centre-back, and I think he looks tailor-made for right-back.
Now, this is a big thing with Ayer because, again, we spoke to Alan Morrison, who does the stats, Celtic by numbers, and he was very complimentary about Ayer's defensive abilities, but a lot of Celtic fans I speak to don't rate him as a defender. And I think that since he's gone into the right back position, Stevie, not only has he flourished going forward particularly, but then, it's given an opportunity to Duffy, and it's almost salvaged a player who a lot of us were writing off. So JP, at the beginning of the season, I think Tommy Rogic had almost been written off. It was as if, he was going to go to Qatar and we'd never see him again for £4 million as it happens. Shane Duffy was maybe in the same boat. People are asking, can we send them back to Brighton in January? All of a sudden, because of the change in position of Ayer, he's covering for our right back, El Hamid, who seems to be on his way out. Have we got a player back in Shane Duffy? Has he turned his Celtic career around?
Well, just before I talk about Shane Duffy, I just wanted to pick up on what you were saying about, why were these guys only played last Thursday? When we've been crying out maybe for them to come in, and I think, as much as people have been critical of Neil Lennon, myself included, I mean, some people have been a bit more vehement with their criticism than others, but you've got to probably credit Neil Lennon with taking that opportunity to put them in that game, which was a no pressure game. If he'd have put them in against Ross County and they hadn't performed and we'd lost to Ross County, we're a busted flush at that point because we've got no reserves left basically to play. But putting them in, probably knowing that they were capable of a performance like that, because he sees them in training, it's not like he would have been surprised by that. Surely you like to think not anyway. So putting them in that game against Leo was his perfect platform for them to play, and then for them to play and beat a very, very good Leo side with something to play for. Who had something to play for, and that gives their confidence levels a massive shot in the arm to go forward into the next game and the game after that. So I think, as much as everyone's just like, Lennon out and all that, I think, huge credit to him for that. And also, moving on to Duffy, I've read Shane Duffy's comments. I watched the interview that was with, is it PLZ Soccer or something like that? It wasn't with any of the mainstream channels, but there was a whole interview just with Duffy talking about how Lennon had put an arm around him and said, I'm backing you, and he was going round to, make sure he was all right at his house and all that, because his children, I think, are in Derry, and he just lost his dad, just before he signed. So there's a lot of factors in Duffy's life that play into this scenario. that people have to remember. And, perhaps it isn't a great surprise that with some nurturing and some TLC, he comes back and delivers performances like he has done the last couple of games. And who's to say he won't save another one for Ibrox Park?
Well, let's hope so. I mean, Stevie, what's your thoughts on that? I've been very critical of Neil Lennon. Maybe not as vehement as some people, particularly on social media, but I made my feelings known, Stevie, speaking to yourself, speaking to other pundits on a Celtic State of Mind. But JP makes a good point there, because obviously Shane Duffy spoke highly of the way that Neil Lennon managed his situation when he was going through tough times. Obviously a wee bit of illness and injury, his family are elsewhere, he's lost his father, and Lenny put the arm around him and done the old man management bit. We've given Lenny, I say we, as a Celtic support, we've given him a hard time. Sometimes you think when we've got that view about Neil Lennon, we seem to ignore some of the good stuff he's doing, such as the man management.
I think he would be great with his players. I think he would be absolutely great. His loyalty to his players is beyond reproach. But it sometimes jumps up and bites him. We can't get away from the fact that we've been poor as a team. You always ask people, what's in 90 minutes? The first time we get 90 minutes was last Thursday night. Mm-hmm. That was a good 90 minutes. So there's something lacking in the whole setup at Celtic. Whether everything is Neil Lennon's fault, I wouldn't think so. But he is the ultimate guy who's going to fall on his head. He's the manager of Celtic. So you're not going to sack 28 players. Neil Lennon can't get rid of the board. So if things don't change, and I'm absolutely delighted with the last two performances, but who would have thought that Klimala, Sorrow, Turnbull and Hazard could come in and done a job? Everybody that comes into your studio could have thought that. The only person who didn't think it was Neil Lennon, because of his stubbornness. So, yep, great man managed handling. Shane Duffy puts that. A lot else falls on his head because he's been too stubborn to change something that wasn't working. And if he goes back on Sunday, a game that I think Celtic would win comfortably if we set up with pretty much the same team, it'll fall on his head again if it doesn't work.
Well, this is a big thing because we're looking at all eventualities, Stevie. If he does make the changes that have been suggested, I mean, they're not confirmed. We won't know until 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon what the team's going to be. But if he does make those changes from what is a winning side, and I take it on board that it's only 2 games we've won, and it doesn't work, does anything change? Now, we'll be getting on to speaking about some of the comments at the AGM where it's quite clear that the board are completely backing Neil Lennon. They've already said that they'll review the situation in January. If the worst case scenario occurs on Sunday, does anything change in that respect? Would they make a change between now and Ibrox on the 2nd of January, do you think, Stevie?
Well, January's only 2 weeks away, 2 weeks on Friday, Paul. So we don't really have that much to wait after that. Would they do it on the 1st of January when you're going to play your rivals on the 2nd? I don't know if they would. So would they allow that game to go ahead and then have another Zoom call? But yeah, we can't afford to lose on Sunday. We're really in the verge of magnificent history that probably won't ever be held again. We can't gamble with that through blind loyalty. I don't think Sorrow and Turnbull are world beaters, but they're playing admirably well for us in the couple of games they've played, and have added an energy that's enthused the other players.
Aye, without a doubt. I mean, the difference in performance of McGregor, for example, I think McGregor was excellent against Kilmarnock. He's not been in his best form this season, so when you bring someone like Sorrow in, it seems to have energised or given him a wee bit of freedom, Stevie. I mean, JP, what is your view on this? Because, I mean, I don't think it's as simple as saying we can review it in January if the worst happens on Sunday.
Well, I think, you have to factor in the possibility that yes, it's a cup final, yes, it's a cup tie, yes, there's a possibility we could lose. I don't want to think about losing because it's a horrible scenario, especially to that team. But I think if we were to lose in a way that was controversial or it wasn't because we didn't put up a performance. Do you know what I mean? Like I think that there's got to be that factored in, but I just can't see anybody else but Neil Lennon being in the dugout for Celtic at Ibrox on the 2nd of January. And regardless, I can't see us capitulating between now and then in the fixtures that we have. So,
well, you've mentioned Ibrox now, JP. So I'm going to run with it, because on a Celtic State of Mind, we're not obsessed with Rangers, as someone has said in the comments. We've not even mentioned them. But if we're going to be playing them, if we're looking ahead to a fixture, if they are indeed the challengers, then you've got to mention them. So we spoke about the performance and the result after the Dundee United game, because I said at that time I didn't expect Dundee United to get anything from that game. But there were signs. There were signs that this side, who have been put on a pedestal this season due to this unbeaten run, could be got at. And I think we did get signs, and I was delighted for the young boy Smith to score against Rangers at Tannadice, because I'm a big Celtic fan, and I know he's old man, so I was delighted for him. But I was looking at that, and I'm looking at the incident with what should have been a sending off, and I'm thinking, they can't go through the whole season riding their luck and not dropping points. So, I've used the headline, Celtic know what it takes to be invincible, because at no point did I ever take that for granted that season. The actual, the incredible effort that it would take to go through an entire league campaign, and indeed 2 other domestic trophies as invincibles. And this club that we are facing at the moment certainly are not. And I'm not saying, JP, that it's going to be another capitulation like we saw last season, but the signs are there, and the signs are there from last night's game that there are going to be occasions. And obviously they've got additional fixtures in Europe as well. But the most important thing is that, Celtic ensure that we keep our backyard in order. And I think with the actual squad that we've got, we can continue this run. But if it comes down to the ineptitude of team selection, Stevie, and we'll see this on Sunday if this is something that might rear its ugly head again, then, we might be looking at a situation where that draw against Hibs at Easter Road, or the draw against St Johnston, might cost us. I've said it all season, it might come down to 1 point. I don't think there's going to be an unassailable points difference between Rangers and Celtic by the time even we go to Ibrox. I honestly think there's going to be points dropped, but we need to make sure that we keep our own house in order. So when you're looking at the last couple of performances by our main challenger, Stevie, what's your view on that? Are we going to see something similar where we start to string together a run of results, whereby we're going into the Ibrox encounter, we've got our games in hand, they've maybe dropped a couple of points?
The pressure's a great thing in football, and if you can play under pressure, you're usually a good player. But pressure can really manifest itself in many different ways. I was really disappointed that Celtic didn't get to play Aberdeen last night in the league game. Mm-hmm. None of the two of them had a fixture. That would have been a good thing to get a wee bit more points on the board, hopefully, before you go to the weekend, because you could fall further behind points-wise. Yep. And they're always better in the bag as no. But now you get into the pressure end of it. This is where things start to happen. You get the injuries, you get the wee bit of suspensions. We've got a great squad, but it's got to have to be managed correctly. And that means playing the guys who are in possession of the jersey now until their form dips, or they pick up an injury or suspension. I think we can still challenge. I've no throwing the towel in any shape or form, but we need to use and utilise our players in the position they're doing with the energy we've shown in the last 2 games.
Okay, we'll not mention the decisive factor of Dallas getting injured in the warm-up before the game in relation to last night, because obviously we didn't want to be called obsessed in that respect either. We will get a look at the comments coming through on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. But before we do that, I would like to say a big congratulations to the Jimmy Johnston Academy, who last week won a national award, Stevie. Our old pal Jim Simonetti, who obviously has been on a Celtic State of Mind many's a time, and all the people that help him at the Academy won an award for their Freedom from Torture campaign, which was incredible. Have a look on Twitter, have a look on YouTube for the video, and rightful winners of that award. So well done to Jim, Kenny and all the rest of the people that help at the Academy. That was a brilliant accolade for them for all the hard work that they put in. This weekend, just a reminder, we are raising funds for those vulnerable people in our communities, such as the homeless, people who are suffering from mental health, as well as vulnerable kids and people who need to use food banks at this time of year of all years, one of the worst years in living memory, if not the worst. At the moment, we've just been informed before we came into the room that we've just hit $7,000 in terms of the total, and that's before we start the event this weekend, which is a 24-hour live event split into two 12s. JP, I don't know if you're old enough to remember Live Aid and all that kind of stuff. There won't be much singing, but we'll certainly be going live, trying to raise cash, and we're bringing together a lot of talented Celtic podcasters, and they're going to be getting 1 hour at a time, and it's going to go like clockwork. Obviously, it's going to be seamless. I'll be here in the background making sure of that, so hopefully we can raise as much cash as possible. But it is incredible, JP, when Celtic fans come together, just how big a difference we can make, isn't it?
Oh, it's fantastic, and props to you for setting it up. I think it's a really great idea, and I think people are buying into it literally, and will buy into it even more when it kicks off, because using the power of a social media tool like Twitter, when you've got so many so many different sites, and putting it all together at the same time, I think that you'll really see a huge impact from that, I've no doubt.
No, I mean, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to St. Rock's, Stevie, being one of the organisations who are coming on to tell us your story, not only about the club, but about Rock Talk. And I think, it's brilliant that the awareness is getting better all the time around mental health issues, and it's good to talk. There's a lot of great campaigns, but one that I've always been impressed by is Rock Talk and what you guys do at James McGrory Park. For anyone who hasn't heard already, give us a wee insight into what we might expect when you guys appear on Saturday.
Well, the 4 people who will be taking part in the podcast all attend Rock Talk. The youngest one would probably be our manager, Paul Kelly, who I think's 56. The oldest will be 76, our honorary president, Gordon Hammond. And we all turn up every Sunday for Rock Talk, and we all benefit greatly from it. Mm-hmm. So we range, the youngest person who comes, I think, is 34. Gordon's the oldest at 76. And every Sunday morning, we have at least 18 people who come in attendance. Some of them are okay with their own mental health, but they have members of their family who suffer from bad mental health, and they learn so much about the traits and what affects their person that they stay with, mm-hmm. which then allows them to cater better for them and be more understanding when they go home. Not everybody who comes to the group speaks. Some of them are quite quiet, but they're all getting some benefit from it. And it's every Sunday morning. And over the last couple of weeks, we've probably had great results where we were able to put an intervention with people who were really making a plan to complete suicide. So it's got a benefit. Things have got worse through the pandemic, through people being furloughed at their work, so much time in their hands, and they need these avenues to express themselves and get some support.
Definitely, I think it's a great job that you're doing, Stevie, and we will be supporting Rock Talk as one of our 4 nominated charities this weekend as well. So $7,000. And JP, what about some of these videos we're getting from the likes of Gianni Capaldi, Tommy Boyd, Bernie Slavin? I've got some other crackers on my phone, by the way.
Frank McAvenny as well, let's not forget. He's my original Celtic hero, scoring those 2 goals in the Scottish Cup final. Apt timing. He's some guy. I've met him a couple of times, and he's not disappointed. Let's put it that way. He's just he's cracks amazing, and it was good to see him getting involved. And the ambassador, Tommy Boyd, who shares my birthday actually. I went and did the Celtic Park tour on my 21st birthday, and my mate gave the tour guide the heads up, and they went and got Tom Boyd out and came up to me and was like, "Heard it's your birthday, sir?" And I was like, "Aye, it's yours as well, right?" And he was like, "Aye." And,
brilliant.
I've got a picture of that actually. I'll send you it.
Have you, JP? Brilliant.
Yeah.
He is actually a great ambassador for the club, Tom Boyd. And, you look at what he achieved for the club, and the fact that, he isn't involved in terms of the management and the coaching, but he's always there and thereabouts. I think he lives and breathes the club, and he's always got time for you as well, which is tremendous. And I was also saying, Stevie Mullen, we had Jackie McNamara in this week chatting away. It wasn't for the Celtic State of Mind, but Jackie followed that up by giving us a video and also a donation to the charity, which was brilliant. But, I do still think Jackie's a great loss to Scottish football. People say, he was a failure at York City. And then, people's views are skewed on his time at Dundee United, because I think he actually, for a spell, done a great job for some time at Dundee United, and the amount of players that he developed there, and obviously the club sold them on, cleared off all their debt. You compare where the club are now to where they were when Jackie left them, and they've gone back to, being several £1 million in debt. So, do you think someone like Jackie, who is making a brilliant recovery from his health scare, might re-enter the field again in Scottish football?
What would be his aspirations, Paul? I think that could maybe determine it. If he thinks he's going to get a Premier League job, would they be sufficiently satisfied that his health is back to normal, and would they be willing to take a risk, that the pressure he could be put under could affect him again health-wise? Or would Jackie's aspirations maybe be a wee bit lower? Because there could certainly be a job for him. He should be involved in football. Yeah. But it depends what level he would be looking to get back in it.
Well, that was the question. Once he left, because he made an impression on everybody that he spoke to in here. And we were talking about him, we were talking about Celtic, and perhaps the management side of things isn't where he's maybe aiming to be at, Stevie. But then you look at the amount of players he's developed, and then you think, well, surely there's a place in our youth academy. Could he not be part of that? Because, he obviously knows a player. He's developed so many talented young players. He continues to do it because, he represents players. He's a consultant for Dunfermline Athletic, who obviously have done pretty well fairly recently with players like Nisbet, who went on to play with Hibs. So I do sometimes look at Jackie and think, you are a loss to the game. I'd love to see him at Celtic Park in some capacity.
But do you know the ins and outs of the contracts for these guys, Paul? I don't. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were saying, certainly not recently, but in the not too distant past, the person that was in charge of the sort of youth development, for every player who went through the youth system into the first team, there was a £10,000 bonus for them. Mm-hmm. So are you trying to nurture talent to make them progress and stay in the first team, or are you just trying to get them in the first team to get your bonus? So there would be a huge conflict of interest there. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to cast aspersions in anybody's character, but some easy way to get a carve up.
There's some brilliant comments coming through today, Stevie, but what I would like to do is have a wee chat about the AGM, because it was happening live during Monday's Bulletin, which was just coincidental that happened to be going on at that time. And a few people says that, I was overcritical of just about all the points that were made, Stevie. So you and I had a wee chat before we came on live today, and you've got a slightly different take from the views that I was expressing on Monday.
Yep, I watched the show on Monday with yourself and Kevin. I watched it the following day with Natasha and Lawrence, and I watched it yesterday with Amy and Kevin. And if we have a Christmas night out when everything's free, I'll have a table I want, or I won't get an invitation at all. Because I think the view that Celtic would use an AGM to make a statement to their fans, telling them everything that was going wrong with the club and owning up to in an honest way to make that statement, I think it would be a Gerald Ratner moment, and I think the club could absolutely bomb if we were to do that. So going for the comments that were made with all your guests, and again it's their opinion, so I respect it. Mine's is slightly different. In fact, it's totally different. That if Peter Law was to make in a statement that the fans would hope, in their opinion, would be honest, he doesn't allow the manager to pick the team. He doesn't allow the manager to make signings. He does all that. He's got a head of football operations that he overruns. He gets the club to do exactly what he says. We can't get a new manager in. We've got to keep the existing one, although he doesn't think he's good enough, because a new manager wouldn't come in and work under him. We then expect Neil Lennon to say, I can't manage the team. I've struggled to get their fitness up. They lack hunger, and I don't know what to do because Peter won't let me do anything. He won't allow me to bring in my own backroom team Then we've got a Gerald Ratner who was the director of, in fact, the owner of Ratner's Group, which had Watches of Switzerland, H. Samuel, and totally bombed because he made inappropriate comments about the quality stuff. I think it would be absolutely ludicrous to use an AGM to make a statement like that. I know you think there should be better fan engagement, and I can't disagree with that. I don't know the correct way to do it, but in my opinion, it certainly wouldn't be an AGM. We've got 10 sort of major shareholders. A lot of them are investment companies who have invested their pension funds into it, and they would all bomb overnight if we made a statement like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, what this show does, Stevie, is it gives everybody a platform to hear their views, and when you put it like that, it's sensible and it's balanced, and it makes me look at my comments and think, well, you know what, Stevie, you're spot on, because I still don't agree with what Peter Lawwell and Neil Lennon said. 100% still don't agree. But obviously I appreciate why they've said it. And that goes down to exactly what you've said there. When it comes to the fan engagement, I still think there's a lot of work to do. It was right that they should give JP Taylor a mention, because I think the work JP does is brilliant and I like him a lot. I think he needs more support, but I think that's something that they've been planning for some time. But in terms of the actual the communication aspect, we did ask JP, I'm going to come to yourself, we asked Peter Lawwell for an interview, which was called Attention Seeking Online, which is great. I get so many compliments on Twitter. Attention Seeking Online. It wasn't attention seeking. It was to offer our listeners a platform to pose questions that we could obviously ask Peter Lawwell. It wouldn't have been live. There's no way I would have expected him to do that. But it's not been a no. What we've been told is not just now. And we're going to revisit that. It's going to be reviewed in January. If you were speaking to Peter Lawwell yourself, JP, what kind of questions would you be asking the CEO?
I mean, if it was completely candid and it was a sort of free shot, I definitely would be asking him about the transfer policy over the last 10 years, because when Stevie read out that list of January transfer signings, it was pretty deflating, you know, to just to know how much money has been sort of, I mean, pretty much squandered. You know, let's not mince words. It has been squandered, and you know, you could say, oh, well, that's our money, as in we've put the money into the club, and this is what you're doing with it. So I would probably try and word a question in a way that wasn't completely offensive, but was, you know, to the point with regards to that, I think.
Well, see, when you do look at the roll call or the roll of dishonour that Stevie read out the other week, it seems as though we are still trying to pull out a nugget from all these names. You know, we're still looking for a Van Dijk, Stevie, or a Wanyama or a Dembele that we can come into the club for 2 or 3 seasons and sell on a massive profit. Do you think those days are gone, Stevie?
Well, as I said to you earlier on, Paul, our head of football operations is now actually on our board of directors, Nicky Hammond. So he's got some sway at the club, some real power. If you were having the riots last week at Celtic Park, he could have walked through in the middle of it and nobody would have known who he is. You know, so he's anonymous. But I think the market is harder and harder, because we had some great success, but now everybody's aware of our success and they're trying to tap into the markets that we were currently or previously working in. It's going to be harder and harder. They're still there if you work hard, but I know we've got a real network. You know, if you talk to Tosh, you know, on a Friday night he's in some strange land, you know, trying to unearth a gem for us. So we're still working very hard, but it's going to be harder to get that gem.
It certainly is. Now, we'll go over to some of the questions or comments that are coming through, starting off with IH Decorating. Welcome back to the show. And you're commenting on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, please ensure that you subscribe. Everything that we're doing is free of charge, and we're building up the subscription base gradually. Now, IH Decorating say, hopefully this acts as a spur to the club and the players. Perhaps this week is a pivotal week in the season. Win the Scottish Cup and really push on. We must apply as much pressure into Rangers as possible. And of course, he's referring, JP, to last night's game. I've got to admit, came as a surprise to me. Had one eye on it at 2-1, and then I seen it going at 2-2. I thought, same old story, waiting for the penalty to be awarded, and then St Mirren win. which was brilliant. Do you think that does spur us on? Is things starting to happen at the right time for Celtic now? Can we build this momentum? And obviously a big part of that will be the Scottish Cup on Sunday.
Well, you said you didn't see it coming. I did, and I put my money where my mouth is. I just wish I'd put more money on it, because I just had a feeling last night that it was going to fold for them. I just looked at St Mirren's recent results, and I thought Jim Goodwin, real canny operator, and Obika up front, always a handful. And as somebody else was saying last night on a podcast, I think it was, or somewhere, somebody was saying that they basically just put Obika on Goldson, and that stopped Goldson playing these long balls forward. So the ball was forced to go to Balogun, and Balogun doesn't have the same quality as Goldson with his passing. So it just completely nullified that part of their game. And, you know, if Jim Goodwin can do something like that, you'd like to think that our coaching team can come up with something for Ibrox. And this whole thing about Ayer playing at right back, Ayer didn't put his hand up in training and say, I want to play right back. You know, our coaching staff decided to play him at right back and have to be given the credit for that happening. So, yeah, I think last night, you know, it just shows that, you know, it's a hard thing to do. As the title of the show says, that we know what it takes to be invincible, and I don't think that'll happen again. I really don't think that'll ever happen again in our lifetimes, that, you know, a team goes through an entire season and wins every single trophy and remains unbeaten. Like, that's just, it's ridiculous, and it should be grateful that we've lived in that time. And I think with the Scottish Cup coming up, rightly at this point, it's come at a time to remind everybody that we are, you know, the dominant force in this country in terms of winning trophies, which is what matters, really.
No, you're spot on. And you actually did send me a screenshot of that bet, so I know that it definitely happened. And you did back St Mirren last night, which I was very impressed about. Now, there was a comment, Stevie, the other day from Natasha, which I found pretty interesting, because I hadn't seen the video, but it was Dafa Bet, speaking to Scott Brown. And he was speaking in such a way that he was almost suggesting, yeah, I will be playing, I'll be leading the team out. And we're getting another message coming through from Zinkovics 8754. We must go out and give everything to nail this quadruple treble. It looks like Lee Griffiths may be starting too. Saw his Daffabet interview. What would you read into that? I know Frank McAvenny, earlier this week was saying that he would maybe throw in Lee Griffiths for a game like Sunday's game. I still view Lee Griffiths as being some way off a starting berth at Celtic.
Again, what would be the basis of starting Lee Griffiths based on what we've seen?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when was his last appearance? He's been injured. He's been, say, when he came on a few weeks ago, I thought he had a belly, you know, which I thought was alarming. I can't see Lee Griffiths. Again, maybe for the first time for a wee while, Celtic have been really cute with his adverts, you know, to throw a wee sort of smoke screen away, you know, that both Scott Brown and Lee Griffiths are going to start. I would be absolutely amazed if both of these guys started. Absolutely amazed. And just to go back to your point about Natasha and Amy, I think they've been absolutely great additions to the Axum team, Paul.
No, I would agree with that, 100%. As has our very own JP. JP came into the studio a couple of years back, and it's been our intention to get you involved ever since then, but obviously everything else takes over. JP, before I ask you another question, you've got a Celtic jersey hanging over your right shoulder. Bizarrely enough, everybody, I think, knows that I have written some time ago the book on Celtic kits. It's not been released yet. Maybe next year will be a better time to release it. I don't know. I'll need to ask the publisher. But that jersey, I remember when that came out. It's a black and gold one, Stevie.
Yep.
And was it Black Magic? Was that the... I think that was the tagline, wasn't it? And I wasn't a big fan, but see, when I started writing about it for the actual the kit book, I had this newfound love for that kit. I think it's class. I probably would have preferred it if it was a full colour crest. What's the biggest memories you have associated with that jersey, and which player do you think of when you see that Celtic jersey?
I'm pretty sure Chris Sutton wore it with like long sleeves, and I remember that, and that must have been sort of, I don't know, what season was it again? Stato's going to need to remind me here what season it was. Oh,
I'm taking a stab. I'm going to say 2004.
Yeah,
it was after the Seville season.
Yeah, I think so. It would have been Larsson's last season then, right?
And he scored a few goals wearing that jersey, I seem to remember. Yeah.
And he also said that it's his favourite Celtic top because he picked it out on an interview when they were in like this sort of shop where they had loads of old strips laid out, and he picks that one out and says, "This is my favourite Celtic top." So I don't know. It was like O'Neill's sort of last hurrah, and it was a special thing. Just looking back at my tickets, I was figuring out how many Scottish Cup finals I've actually attended in my life, and it's 6, only 6, which doesn't sound that many, but I mean, I guess over the course of time, that it was always hard to get tickets for Scottish Cup finals. They were like gold dust, and to think that there's one happening on Sunday with nobody there, it's heartbreaking. But yeah, I keep all my strips in decent condition.
Oh, you certainly do. I'm actually looking at that. I don't have my notes in front of me, JP, but I'm going to say that was the first ever Celtic jersey that had the star on its crest. I think that was where it was introduced.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think I remember that. Mm-hmm.
And I'm now looking at it thinking, did Craig Bellamy wear that? I think Craig Bellamy wore that as well, which would have been Martin O'Neill's last season, would it not?
Yeah, he definitely wore it. It's in my mind that Bellamy had that top on. Yeah, I just wanted to say something about Natasha and Amy. Like, I can't believe somebody was digging you up on Twitter saying, "Oh yeah, box ticking exercise," and it's just like, really, like that is one of the most mental things I've ever read on Twitter. It's just I couldn't believe somebody actually was having a go on that front. But yeah.
It's incredible what you get stick for online, and what I try to do is go through the comments after the broadcast as well, just to weed them out. It's like a full-time job at the minute, JP, but interestingly enough, and I did say this, Stevie, I had a passing interest in the result last night. Celtic are out the cup. I was doing other things, but I kept an eye on the score. JP was obviously following it because he had some cash in the game. He had some skin in the game. And when it happens, you're like, well, great, brilliant. And then I think, how does that affect Celtic? And then that is always my key focus. At no point does it cross my mind, I'm going to go on a Rangers forum or a Rangers podcast and start commenting. No. I find that behaviour absurd.
It's not for me. I couldn't possibly do it. See, I was out last night, then just as I was going back to the car and my phone started pinging, it was texting me videos about the result. But again, I probably wouldn't even have known that Rangers were playing last night, as I say. But I think the pressure, and I hope it can build momentum for Celtic. But I say my concern is what Celtic do. The other side of the city, they'll have their own things at how they're going to progress. But if we concentrate on ourselves and we get a run of form together and good performances allied to good result, then I think we'll be absolutely fine. I say I would still have rather have changed the manager, but while he's in position, I'll continue to give him 100% support.
Mm-hmm. Well, Will McMillan on Facebook comments that get Christie on, Frimpong off, get the win, then try and turn the screw in the league. Also agree with Stevie, we should be getting our games in hand played. One thing about the cup games last night is what we got. We got St Johnston, Livingston, St Mirren or Hibs, right? So I think probably the favourites are going to be Hibs, which takes us on to the question of Jack Ross, who's been quoted as being a possible successor of Neil Lennon. Now, he was actually asked the question in a press conference last week, and I think Jack Ross pointed out that Neil Lennon's still in position there, so it's a wee bit disrespectful to be asking the question. But see, when you look at the way that some clubs deal with the situation, Stevie, and I'm referring to yesterday with West Brom. So West Bromwich Albion are in a bad run of form. Slaven Bilic gets the boot, and immediately Allardyce is in place, and you can see Allardyce has been brought in for that rescue mission, isn't he? He's coming in to save them from relegation. He said that signed into his contract that if they do get relegated, he can leave. And you're just looking at how decisive the club is, though. And I just feel that there's an indecisiveness just now about Celtic, because we were in a position, maybe not quite as bad. It was 17 games they've gone in the league, but we were in a position whereby our season was getting further and further away from us, and you're relying on a capitulation. You're relying on things that evidentially were not going to happen, i.e. Celtic were going to start winning game after game after game this season, and Rangers were going to lose games. We just sat on it and hoped for the best and hoped that it would be turned round. I mean, is that the right way to approach it, Stevie, in your view, from Celtic's perspective, or should we be more decisive in making these decisions?
It's definitely not the correct way, in my opinion. But I think the situation that Celtic are in is pretty unique. Sam Allardyce, David Moyes, traditionally, Tony Pulis, these guys go in and save clubs from relegation. And they've got a great track record. We're asking somebody to come in to win a league, a very historic title. Mm-hmm. So it's a different mindset that you would need for that. So these guys probably wouldn't be able to come in and do what we asked them to do or what we would need them to do. But we don't seem to have, and this is what we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, the $1 million question. Would Peter and Dermot know that we don't know that they think this is the correct way to go? Because pretty much universally, everybody thought there should have been a change. Apart from the guys who wanted Neil to stay regardless of what happened, and they're probably all the same guys who are desperate for Scott Brown to start. They think by backing them up, they're better Celtic fans, they're more loyal, they're faithful, more faithful through and through than everybody else. But there's got to be a reason why we didn't make that decision when it should have taken place. I've even heard in the last couple of weeks about we're missing the fans. We had fans when we got knocked out with Cluj in Copenhagen. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't have the bearing that we're now claiming with Neil saying we probably would have went through if the fans would have been there. Well, the previous seasons, we had fans and we still didn't go through. Yeah. There's a fundamental thing just missing. And I say, maybe, just maybe by one stroke of good fortune, when we were forced sort of to play the young guys last week, that the season has changed on that pivot.
Well, I hope so, Stevie. And going by Mr. Briggs's comments here as well, if Jack Ross wins that cup, it will push him higher on the bookie odds to be our next manager. I do like Jack Ross, JP. I can see you shaking your head, but I don't see him as a Celtic manager.
Nah, no chance. Jack Ross, to me, I think he's a good manager, but he kind of looks like a sort of identikit manager, like see if you're playing FIFA and they don't have, the actual faces of people when they go in to do the transfer deals and all that. He looks like your sort of just, your standard manager, he's dressed well and all that, talks well. I just don't know what his end game is going to be. I don't know what Jack Ross's highest point in his career will be right now. I couldn't tell you what that will be, but I don't think it will be a Celtic manager. That's for sure. I just don't think he's got the tools.
I just when I look at his career, JP, I look at the Sunderland move being the wrong side of the Hibs move. I always felt Ala was St Mirren Hibs, and then he'd be looking maybe to move down south. That and I think in many ways the Sunderland job came too soon for him. I do think that they sacked him prematurely, but that's just the way it is. That's why we're talking about managers and the decisiveness of the clubs down there, or ruthlessness perhaps is a better word. But Mark, welcome back to the show, Mark. It's always a pleasure to see you commenting on YouTube. Celtic FC go for success by winning. Allardyce's success is saving clubs from relegation. So that goes back to the point you made, Stevie. I mean, to bring someone in, and I was one of the biggest advocates of making a change, to bring someone in just now, it's not as though you're trying to get a run together and parking the bus and saving yourself from relegation. This is to turn around a season to win a league. I mean, someone hopefully can come in and help me out here. I can't think of a scenario like that where someone's come in. It's not as though Neil Lennon came in to turn anything around to win the league first time round. I mean, it's not as if we were completely out of the title race when Lenny took over from Brendan Rodgers. I mean, when you're looking at that, is it just a case of the board looking at it and thinking, well, who on earth is going to come in and make that change?
But if we get Jack Ross, is that now Celtic strategy? Because that would be through your last 7 Celtic managers that came from Aberdeen. With a couple of crackers thrown in, and Brendan Rodgers and Martin O'Neill, and then Bronny. So I don't think Jack Ross is ready to be manager of Celtic if we have the aspirations that the fans have. I think we should be looking much higher up the pecking order than that. There's no disrespect to Jack Ross. I think he's a good young manager, but I don't think he's anywhere near ready to take over Celtic.
Well, Keir Har on YouTube agrees with you, Stevie. He says that Jack Ross is not yet for me. Readdress him in 5 years and see how he's got on. It's one of the ones as well, though, that you might look at a manager. I'm going to use a couple of examples from previous gaffers that have gone down south, and I'm not saying for a minute that Owen Coyle should ever be the Celtic manager, but when he went down south, we wouldn't have considered him. When he left St Johnston, we wouldn't have considered Owen Coyle as a manager of Celtic. He goes down there and makes a name for himself, and then he knocks us back. And that's what happens with players as well, doesn't it? There's a moment where if you don't sign McGinn, he's out of your price range. If you don't bring in somebody like Jack Ross, and I'm not saying I would bring him in, it gets to the stage where you can't get them, because then they enter the highest kind of paid managers that is beyond your kind of bracket. Although I don't think Neil Lennon isn't well paid, because you see some of the quotations on his salary, Stevie, and he's getting paid more, I think, than virtually everybody in Serie A.
They're very well paid, Neil Lennon at Celtic. But I think their next manager, and this is where you would need to know the strategy of the club. Do you bring in a young manager who's going to be given time to develop a team, or are we going to bring in a manager for instant success? Mm-hmm. If you're going to go to the higher echelons, then you'll have somebody else in charge of your youth setup. If you've got a younger manager, more on the ball, who's going to be involved in everything, then the whole club progresses. But that's a time-consuming thing. If we're looking at getting into a new league, by England, Atlantic League, what Kevin and Colin were talking about yesterday, you're going to need somebody who can hit the ground running and get your team in, because you're not going into that to fail. So I would need to know the strategy of the club. That would probably define what your next manager is going to be, or who he's going to be.
No, you're absolutely right. Now, this is another thing that's been cropping up, JP. Jungle Lion asks the question, does Lennon need a father figure on board to bounce ideas off? I think, you know what, I think earlier on this season, he certainly needed somebody in whereby he's chosen them, he's selected them, and he's one of his men. Now, at the moment, I can understand why Jungle Lion's asking that question, because I think that Neil Lennon probably does need someone to bounce ideas off, to get some kind of support from, and I don't think he's getting that at the moment from his coaching team.
Can I ask a question to you, Paul?
Yeah.
Based on that, what's the difference between a director of football and a head of football operations? Would that not be the guy that Neil Lennon could turn to?
I would expect that to be that position between the CEO or the board and the football operation. So we've already got one.
Yep.
And then you ask yourself, what's the relationship there? Is it working? Is the structure working? Because the other matter would be, people think, well, who is Neil Lennon's mentor? Well, it's Martin O'Neill. But Martin O'Neill's at an age now, and I'm not being ageist, but in terms of football management, he's 68. So I remember when people were saying, bring in Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane. I mean, a lot of Celtic fans were saying, bring in Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane. For me, that ship sailed a long, long time ago. I mean, Roy Keane, although he would be Martin O'Neill's assistant manager, who else would allow Roy Keane to be their assistant manager? That's a genuine question. JP, I mean, he's been Martin O'Neill's assistant manager, Paul Lambert, of course, for a spell at Aston Villa. But will he get another job in football, in management? I don't think he would.
I do love Roy Keane, and I think he's great. He's great TV, you know, and his little sound bites that you see from games that he's commentated on Sky Sports are normally good for a watch. But I think, judging by the way that he's got on with players in his past, and it's just, he's far too divisive a character. And if people, you know, are worried about, you know, the mentality of players nowadays, maybe not taking to Neil Lennon, how in hell would they take to Roy Keane? You know, I mean, let's face facts. The guy's an absolute maniac in the nicest possible way, but I mean, he is a maniac.
The big thing for me, Stevie, talking about Roy Keane there and how he would deal with a player like Edouard or a surly man like Cham, you know, if Neil Lennon can't deal with him. But I look at his record. I just look at his managerial record. He's only managed 181 games. So he's been assistant for years. His last managerial position, and please someone check it on Wikipedia, but it was 7 or 8 years ago. And then when you look at where he's managed, 3 seasons, so the vast majority, I think bar 1 season, has been in the Championship in England. So if you want to do it on merit, he wouldn't be quoted. You're doing it because of what he did as a player, because of his profile, I guess, because of his connections with Celtic, but you certainly wouldn't be giving him a job because of his managerial stature or pedigree. I've thrown in a couple of names, and people have mocked me for throwing them in, or just said, you know, they're not good enough. And that's something, again, that I think Celtic fans need to be wary of, Stevie. Now, when we appointed Gordon Strachan, at that time, you know, if you look at his record in English football, and yes, I know he got Southampton to an FA Cup final, But if you're looking at win percentages of Gordon Strachan, I mean, it was nothing to write home about. Even Brendan Rodgers, you know, a manager who we got into the habit of calling an elite manager. I think what Rodgers did is he implemented a lot of what you would describe as elite practices within the club.
Yeah.
So things that Celtic weren't doing before, and he had seen it at Chelsea, and he had seen it when he was at Swansea even, and Liverpool. He started implementing a lot of the elite practices. But Brendan Rodgers, when we appointed him, wasn't an elite manager. And there's other managers out there who would do a job, I'm not going to say the same job, because obviously Brendan Rodgers had an invincible treble season, which I don't think we'll ever see again. But you've got a lot of managers who have managed at the top level in English football who would come into Celtic and make a huge change, a massive change in culture for a start. Now, I've mentioned previously the Mark Hughes and Mark Bowen partnership. And again, people say no chance, because what they're looking at is they're looking at a style of football perhaps, or they're looking at Mark Hughes' last managerial appointment at Southampton. Let's not forget that was 25 games out of 610 games at the top level of English football or at international level. So we better be very careful about who you would write off. So when I see names like that, I much prefer going and having a look at their statistics, and then I say, are they better than what we've got at the moment? And with those two guys, and that would probably be peppered with maybe some kind of Celtic connection. Obviously, there are various names that could be mentioned from the kind of Welsh background. Then I would definitely recommend that they would be better than what we've already got. And then a management stroke coaching team. That's something we don't have at the moment.
Again, Neil Lennon was quite happy to take the job, Paul, with those provisos. He was getting who he was to work with. If you're a top manager, or you've got that confidence in your ability, you don't accept the conditions. Neil was more than happy to accept him. If Mark Hughes said he was coming in, Mark Hughes would tell you who his coaching team is going to be,
yes,
who his management staff is going to be. Roy Keane, I don't know many managers who's been a manager who then go back to being an assistant and are comfortable being that, because they always want to be the guy with the final decision. So Roy Keane and that, only for me, I think that's the only thing that's given me a bit of hope, that the person that Celtic have targeted isn't available to January. That could be the only reason why we're continuing to do what we're doing just now. There would be loads of people and very good candidates who would take that job in a heartbeat.
I totally agree with that. What about Davy Moyes?
Well, again, when David Moyes was linked with the job, an awful lot of Celtic fans, he's no for us, and he's proven that West Ham is a very good manager. Very unlucky at Manchester United.
I think so. And what about yourself, JP? A few names been thrown about on the show today. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, I tend to agree with Stevie, because, you know, we've already spoken about the astuteness, the business acumen of Peter Lawwell, Dermot Desmond. They're able to make big decisions and ruthless decisions. And it could well be that they're waiting for other reasons for January.
Well, two things. The first thing was about when Neil Lennon was brought in to replace Brendan Rodgers after in February of 2019. At that point, do you think he was given the option to I'm trying to think here. I think he was given the option to maybe bring in his coaching staff in the summer after the season had finished? So just basically go with what we had, and then in the summertime, do you think because it went so well, it was kind of like, oh well, these guys have done well for you, so, you know, how about just keeping them on? Well,
I think when you're looking at it, it's easy now to look back, but it was going well. That's the thing, JP. It was going well, and I think there's also a big part of the issue has been that Damien Duff obviously has left, so the dynamic has changed. But you speak to, or you hear what Damien Duff says about John Kennedy, and he rates him very, very highly. Damien Duff has been replaced by Gavin Strachan. And obviously he's a guy who's taken a lot of stick in relation to how he got the job, why he got the job. We know that it certainly wasn't Neil Lennon's selection, but by all accounts, the actual arrangement was run past Neil Lennon in the end. Neil Lennon wanted Tommy Johnston. That's who Neil Lennon wanted as his coach, and he didn't get him. So, you know, that for me was a bigger error. So, yeah, last season you look at how that happened after Rodgers left. You've got Duff, you've got Kennedy and Lennon. It worked. So a lot of the time you don't question it. But we're probably guilty of that anyway, GP, aren't we? I mean, we're fickle as football fans. And if we go on a 12, 15, 20 game run just now, a lot of the people who have been shouting for sack the board will become very quiet. And we know that from the first time it happened back in the 90s. Jim Orr speaks about that. But we are fickle and we take that on board. But I think one of the biggest issues has been the fact that when there was an opportunity after the success for Neil Lennon to choose his own man, I think that's where the problem's been.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, you know, the Strachan appointment confuses me because it doesn't seem to fit with everything else that's going on. You know, did Neil Lennon even meet Gavin Strachan before? Did he know him? I know that he's pals with Gordon Strachan and stuff like that, but I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean by proxy that he's, you know, knows his son. Mm-hmm. So I just don't know like what sort of connection there was there between them. And you know, knowing that Neil Lennon wanted perhaps Tommy Johnston or Johan Mjällby as his assistant, you know, to come in at that point, it just points to a disconnect then between Neil Lennon and the board. I still feel uncomfortable about talking about potential new managers at this point, and it's not because I have some sort of, you know, blind loyalty to Neil Lennon because of what he's done for the club. I just think it's because he's the manager in situ at the moment still, and you know, I want to support him while he's there, and I thought we were moving towards a point when we lost to Ross County that it was going to be game over for him. You know, mm-hmm. It was starting to look like, how is he coming back from this? But I mean, he is on the ropes. He's got, you know, a bloody nose, a burst eye. You know, everything is going against him here. But I mean, if anybody could turn something round like this, it's Neil Lennon. Let's face facts. I mean, what he's done in the past, if anybody could come back from this, then it's him. And I would be one of the happiest people on the planet if he did, because I've only met him a couple of times, but you know, the guy's a legend. Let's face facts, he's a legend.
No, that doesn't change. You're spot on. Now, we're just watching Davy Moyes on the TV just now, Stevie, and I think you're right. He's proved that he's a very, very capable manager. But let's get Sunday out of the way. We'll see what happens on Sunday. But Stevie, you'll be back on Saturday with St. Roch's for the treble, the quadruple treble charity fundraiser, which I'm looking forward to. We'll keep pushing that, so check all the socials. And for everybody else, if you've not already subscribed, please do so on YouTube, because we're going out every single day. All that's left for me to say is thank you once again, JP Mason and Stevie Mullen, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Thank you.